Hi everyone. Today we are going to go over some basics of Gimp. By now you should have gone into the website that is in the lesson and downloaded a version of Gimp. You can see on my desktop I already had it downloaded, so I just clicked the icon to open it up. Now I already have a bunch of my toolboxes set. So you can see on my screen, and this is a Mac, so on a PC it'll look a little bit different, but the same tools. I have my toolbox and brushes palette here. I have my more brush palette down below it. On this side I have what's called a layers palette. And down below here I have another palette that works with gradients if that's something that you choose to work with. If you open up Gimp and you do not see any of those palettes, what you will need to do is go to Windows, and go to Dockable Dialogues. And here you can choose your different palettes. So let me close all these palettes down. That way I'll have that option to open them back up for you so you can see that. So you go to Windows, Dockable Dialogues. I want to have the tool options. So that opens up a palette for me. I'm going to go back to Windows, New Toolbox. This toolbox will actually give me all the different tools. To reshape the toolbox, like I prefer to have more of a rectangle or square. You just drag a corner to change the shape, and then put it over to the side wherever you feel comfortable. Again, you'll want to go to the Windows. I like to also do the tool options. Oh no, I've got the tool options up already. Never mind. Dockable Dialogues, you want to have a layers palette. Now, once I have the layers palette, I can actually click on this little arrow right here to configure this palette. And I'm going to add a tab. I'm going to add channels, which is one layer that you may choose to work with. I'm also going to add a tab and do the undo history. This is a really important one. I'm also going to add the tab here and do, let's see, what other one do I want? Actually, for now, let's keep that in its own palette. I'm going to go back to the Windows, Dockable Dialogues, and I want to add brushes. I'm going to take my brushes down here. I'm going to actually take my tool options over here. I like to have my brushes underneath. So for now, that is all you really need to get going. There are a lot of other little nuances of different tools that you can use that over time you may choose to use as you get more sophisticated with your Gimp work, but for this introduction, this is all you need. So now I'm in the situation where I want to start a new project. So if you go to File, you can either go to New to open up a new window that's blank. So we'll do that today. And when you have, or when you click on New, it'll pop up and it will ask you what the size of the image you want. So 640 by 400 is pretty small. So let's do 800 by 600. That's still not a real big image, but it gives you a little more space. Say OK. All right, so now you have a new project going on here. It's untitled. We can title it later. But I want you to look over here at this layers palette If I click on the left side where you see a bunch of white paper stacked on top of each other, this is the layer. And if you see down here it says background and it shows this picture of white, that's the one layer that I have on here now. I really suggest, layers are super important. I always suggest to create a new layer every time you add something into your piece. So if you wanted to collage multiple digital photos of yours together to create a new image, you would want to have each one of those photos on a different layer. Same with if you were going to draw onto them or do any kind of filter work, you'd want to have the different parts of the total image on different layers, because that way you can work on one specific layer and not affect everything. So I am going to add a layer here by just clicking on this little icon, and I'm going to name it layer 1. You can name it whatever you want. If you're going to draw sky, you could name the layer sky or sun or whatever you wanted to. You'll notice in the layer palette it looks like it's a checkerboard, and that's because it's actually a transparent layer. So I see through that transparency, I can still see that white background. But if I clicked on this little eye icon on the background, you would then see on your workspace just that checkerboard transparency. And that's the image that Gimp uses to show that that layer is transparent, just like a window. Okay, I'm going to click that eye back on so we can see the white. Now in the toolbox, there's lots of different tools you can use. There's pencils, there's paintbrushes, there's shape tools where you can make a selection, make a shape. There's also an elliptical tool for more of a rounded shape. So if I click on the rectangle shape tool, I can create a rectangle. Say I want to make a blue rectangle. If I click on these right here, these two, foreground is black, background is white, these little color squares. If I click on one, it gives me the option of changing my colors to all sorts of different things. So I'm going to click a blue here and say OK. And I want to fill this square with a blue. So I'm going to go to Edit, and I'm going to go to Fill with Foreground. FG color means foreground color, and that's the blue. The BG is background color, which is white, and I don't want the background color. So now I've got a blue rectangle. And that blue rectangle is on a separate layer from that white background. So if I click that eye off of the background again, you'll still see the blue rectangle. You just won't see the white of the background layer. Now if I want to get rid of this selection, I can go to Select, None, and it'll get rid of it for me. You can also use the pencil or the paintbrush when you get into doing more drawing on your photos. With the paintbrush, you can select different paintbrush styles down here in the brush palette, and you can, oh, I still have that blue selected. So I'm paintbrushing with this star brush. If I want to go to something that's a little bit more of a typical brush, I can do that. I'm going to change the color though. Let's go to a red, kind of like more of a pink. That works. And I can paint with a little bit more of a typical brush. So you can play with all sorts of different brush styles here as you're being creative with your pieces. Here's one. This one's kind of funny. It's like a bunch of peppers. Here's one that's more square. So you can really be creative with just the different ones. Now if I click on a paintbrush and I want to change the brush options on it, I can go back over here to this tool option palette, and that's why this tool option palette is really important. I can paintbrush with, right now it's on 100% opacity, which means it's the densest it's going to be, but I could change it. I could change the opacity down to, say, let's say about 50%, And now you'll see that the pink is about 50% lighter or 50% transparent. There's also modes that allow you to paint a little bit different in different ways, but I'm not going to get into that quite yet. Now up here in the layers palette, you'll see that all of the painting that I've done so far has just been on this one layer. Now here's a great example of why doing all these different marks on separate layers would have been a good idea. Say I didn't like this stroke right here and I wanted to erase it. Because it's on the same layer as this rectangle, if I go to the erase tool and I erase it, I'm also going to erase the blue rectangle. And that's much harder. So if I add another layer, I'm going to name this one layer 2. And I'm going to do a different color. Here's more of the red. And I'm going to I'll take a paint or a pencil this time. And the size of my pencil, if you want to change your pencil size, you can change it over here in this tool option palette. Say, well, that pencil is ginormous. Say I accidentally color over that blue rectangle and that was an accident. Because it's on a separate layer, I can now erase it, and I'm only erasing that mark, and I'm not touching that blue rectangle. So you can see, even just with this example, how really trying to use a lot of layers for your different parts of your images that you're working on can be really important, because then you can get rid of or change one specific part without it affecting another part that you don't want to change. Hopefully that makes sense. So we'll get that pencil back again. Let's do our little layer here. I'm just going to play a little bit with a few different layers, so we have several different layers that we can manipulate. Let's go into another color. We'll play with this yellow. I'm going to go back to the paintbrush and try some different paintbrushes out. Remember, I'm on a different layer, so I can scribble over the top of everything. And play with that a little bit. Now, you can see how the yellow is sitting on top of all of those other marks from those layers, and that's because if you look at the layer palette here, this layer number 3 that has the yellow in it is on top of all of the other ones. I can rearrange them. I can take these arrows down here at the bottom of the layer palette and I can move the layers around a little bit, which is one nice way. So if I click on a different layer, maybe I click on layer 1 and I want to move it up, you can play with rearranging these layers in different ways to figure out what it is that you like, how you like to have them arranged. So again, that's another great example of why layers can be so important. Okay, so for this tutorial, I think we're going to end here. I would like for you, before you get into the assignment, to just open up your Gimp once it's downloaded, open up a new project, play with some layers just like I did. Go to the toolbox, play with paintbrush, play with pencil, play with your different shape tools to fill in the colors. Remember to fill, after you get the shape, you have to go to edit and then fill with whatever the foreground or background color is that you want. Play with the different paint brushes. Play on the tool option palette with the different sizes, maybe even the different opacity that you can use for the paintbrushes and pencils. And just get a feel of what this basic part of Gimp is like. When you come back and watch the next videos, we will look at filters.